What's going on, everybody? And on here, and this is going to be a pretty detailed, in-depth video. And this is pretty much me calling BS on Pokemon's statement here. I've spent a bunch of time researching over the last couple of weeks, just in general about the print capacities of Pokemon cards, etc. So everybody should recall there was this press release that came out with prismatic evolutions going crazy with scalping, etc. Basically saying, we understand the inconvenience can be disappointing for fans. We're actively working to print more of the impacted Pokemon TCG products as quickly as possible at a maximum capacity to acknowledge this. Reprinted products are expected to be available, blah, 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 blah. So people who don't know any better took this as there's a ton of product coming on the market. Things are going to crash. Everything's going to be happy. It's 2020 all over again. They have no idea what the heck they're talking about. This was simply a press release just to calm people's nerves and tell people what they wanted to hear. And I'm going to explain exactly why that is. And we're going to go into some of the details and some of the technical aspects of this. So if you have a short attention span, this video is probably not for you. If you want to learn some interesting points here, have at it. So the first thing we need to talk about is the Pokemon Company. And the Pokemon Company differs from Hasbro Wizards of the Coast in pretty much every way possible. They're completely polar opposites. So Hasbro Magic, publicly traded company in the United States. They have quarters to hit, shareholders, etc. That is not the case with the Pokemon Company. So the Pokemon Company is a joint venture. They're owned by Nintendo, Game Freak. I believe they focus on the video game side of it, and Creatures, who focuses on the TCG aspect of the game, branding, development of the IP, etc. And the business was created in 1998 as a joint venture. And for those of you who don't know that much about the Pokemon Company or Nintendo, Nintendo's been up and down over the years. And 1998 was a little bit of a lull per se, but this was a joint venture, and all three of these groups are one-third partners, a third. In fact, Nintendo, if you look at their financial statements, they use the equity method of accounting, not trying to get into too much detail, but they basically take a third of the results of Pokemon, they consolidate them in their financials, and that's how they report their earnings. But this is a little bit of a long-winded, detailed way of saying that there is no pressure on the Pokemon Company to perform, full stop. They don't have to hit quarters. They don't have to hit years or budgets. They don't have any shareholders to answer to. You don't have the toxic culture of publicly traded companies in the US or Europe to deal with. It just doesn't happen. So my point in saying this is the Pokemon Company loves money, but they are not going to give up future potential of the brand, of the company, of the game to make an extra dollar today. They're not going to whore themselves per se, like Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast have for the last couple of years, because they're desperately in need of money because the rest of the business is a bag of garbage. So we don't have the public company pressures. So that being said, a lot of people like to look at these reprints and say, it's going to be 2020, 2021, 2022 all over again. And my response to that is it's not going to be. In fact, I look at that event as completely unknown. There wasn't a single company in the world who forecast supply, demand, anything, any metric whatsoever correctly. And it's just, it was a complete unknown. And look, the Pokemon Company overshot their production. And the reason they did that is the lag time in production is astronomically long. The other issue, as we'll get into the details, is the Pokemon Company, they didn't own their own printer at the time until 2022. So they had purchased all of this space. But also once they acquired their own printer, a lot of the other customers and suppliers had either gone bust, they've completely shut down, and there was availability in the printer that doesn't exist today. So let's take a look at Millennium Print Group, and I want to go a little bit of a different order here. So Millennium Print Group, Pokemon Company, acquired in 2022. And if we look at this, looks great. They're in North Carolina. They have a couple of facilities here. Here's your capabilities. So they're effectively printing for all kinds of different companies' products. They don't just print for the Pokemon Company. In fact, if anybody knows anything about M&A, if you make an acquisition that is a vertically integrated acquisition, the last thing you want to do is cut off the revenue that it's generating from other customers, assuming that it's an acceptable margin, because all it does is that impairs your return on investment. So if you look here, you can begin the conversation. You can actually reach out as a potential customer and you can talk to these folks. There's availability within the company. They're run completely independently, and this is all disclosed that they run independently. And, Pokemon is a customer. And there's a video from 2 years ago where the gentleman mentions that they did about $140 million of revenue, and they're excited with that. So that's great. So these guys have locations in the U.S. and Netherlands. If you look at the Pokemon Company disclosure, they print outside of Japan. They print in the U.S. and Netherlands. Netherlands for Europe, obviously. So now here they have, lines, feeders, etc. I believe somewhere here they disclose they have about 8 production lines. Here's the facility. They operate 24/7. So 1.8 million square feet of secure climate-controlled space. So that is not just the facilities to manufacture, it's also the warehousing. So you're limited to how much production space you have in there because you have to store the stuff afterwards. And they're already saying they operate 24/7. Now, that's not to say they're fully ramped up, fully ramped down. We'll get into that in a second. But again, they're a subsidiary of the Pokemon Company International, but they do have other customers, a lot of other customers. And, they're obviously actively soliciting here, and they do, brochures, basically all printing and paper products. So let's go to careers. So when I look at careers, what I want to look at is what are they hiring? Are they actively trying to grow the business? Can they grow the business? What are they focused on? And I will tell you that with the eight print lines or whatever they have here, to add a new print line, they're going to need a new facility because you're not going to be able to add a new line in the current facility with the same logistical processes that you have from a storage perspective today. It doesn't work. A lot of the stuff's finely tuned. A lot of the stuff's manual. It's not so finely tuned. So the company's going to be about as fine tuned as it could be. That being said, for them to expand a new line of production, they're going to have to acquire a new facility. They're going to have to acquire new equipment. It's going to have to be installed, tuned again. They're going to have to hire a whole army of new people. In the Carolinas, not a super high unemployment rate there. But if they were to do that, you would expect them to say, hey, we have a new facility opening. We're hiring all these people. So let's look and see. So the first thing we touched on was they're not going to fire all of their customers and kick these guys out because everybody's doing well right now. The economy is not dead like it was in 2020 to 2022, where a lot of their customers potentially bankrupted or were happy to pull the projects and not have the liability. And, Pokemon was able to jump in and add new production time that was completely unoccupied. So 23 jobs currently, finishing, HR, inventory management, fulfillment lead, night shift. So night shift is interesting. 2 IT people, 4 people in maintenance support. So the most important and the most effective way to increase your productivity is to minimize your downtime in production. So the fact that they're looking at hiring 4 people here is good. Not to say that they didn't need them before, but it's obviously a shortage here. Maintenance facility associate, packaging, pre-press, screen printing operator, 4 press people, so night shift lead, offset printer, press associate, kind of standard folks. Night shift supervisor, I would imagine night shift is a kind of pain in the butt to hire, and then some QA support, security, and shipping and receiver. So we have as many press operators as maintenance technicians. You would assume that if they're actively ramping up, they need to fill all these shifts. They would have 20, 30 different postings here. They don't exist because the print line's already operating at full capacity. So instead of adding and ramping up print run or print capacity, which is, you go back to this, this kind of dumb press release, all they're doing is they are actively trying to minimize the downtime so they can push out as many cards as they can and as much product as they can with the capacity that they currently have. Because these guys are smart. They're not going to spend $50 million, $100 million on a line that, in a year and a half, it could be vacant. Now they have to go and they have to sell new products to other businesses to fill the gap. It's not going to happen because it's not 2021, 2022 all over again. They're not stupid. And there was no lesson learned in 2022 in COVID because there's nothing to learn because it's never going to repeat itself again. So what the Pokemon Company can do is obviously minimize downtime, which I've mentioned 3 times now, but they can take print time of other products and, call it Twilight Masquerade, Surging Sparks, which we have a bunch of that coming through distribution, Temporal, call it SV 1, 2, 3, and 4. They could short print Journey Together and shift more of that print time to prismatic evolutions. But what they can't do is they can't increase the print time of everything all at once. It just doesn't work that way. So for that reason, this is just telling people what they want to hear. They can't print more because they're tapped out. And if they could print more, they'd be hiring folks. So that being said, let's go to bottleneck number 2. And this is a video that came out a couple years ago. This is actually really cool. So it's creation of Pokemon cards. And what I want to do, back it up a couple seconds here. So card correlation, I found this fascinating. So each one of these is, here's 1, 1, 2, 2. There's 16 total lines. So there's 8 different rarities. It looks like from a collation perspective of what can go in the card, which is kind of cool to see. But I just want to fast forward this for 10, 15 seconds here. If you haven't seen this, this is them just putting the cards into the appropriate collation item, which is set to insert X number of cards based on rarity. But I want to get to the packaging. And this is where it's interesting because when it comes to automation, packing or stuffing items in packages works really well when it's a fixed dimension. But with packs like this, they move. So trying to pack 36 packs automatically in a booster box, it doesn't work very well. And if it breaks one time, it's just going to gum up the entire works. So if you look here, and again, this is from 2020, I believe. Probably a little bit before COVID because this is a Sun and Moon product. It's actually Ultra Prism, so I think this is 2018. But this person is hand packing booster boxes. And you can see that they have to do that because you can't automate it. And here, this is a shrink wrap. So if you look here, just real quick, it's worth the wait. So there's the packs coming out, and they can just kick packs out like crazy. But when it comes to packing them into the final product, so here you can see, again, she's packaging these by hand. Then it goes through, this is a heat sink. So it's going on a metal tray, they're wrapping it. The heat's just going to come through and tighten up the shrink wrap around it. She has gloves on because it's hot. And then here, they are physically putting the boxes in the case by hand and they're taping them. So then they're putting the label on. So if this is still the way it's going, and I have no reason to believe it's not, you can automate everything you want, but you can only fit so many people in a physical location who can operate effectively and efficiently until they start running into each other. So Yeah, long story short, this is not going to happen. The Pokemon Company is maxed out about as much as it can be. And this is it. And I actually talked to somebody in Discord who's in the paper sale industry, and they had mentioned that they know who Pokemon Company buys their paper from, and it's been pretty consistent. Now, I believe it said something like 40 truckloads a day in one facility, 20 in another facility, and it's been pretty consistent for a while now, and that's because there's not much they can do. And, for those of you who are naysayers and say, well, they short printed Obsidian and Paradox, to some extent, Temporal, Twilight Masquerade. They did, but they didn't just shut the factory down. They were actively providing more runtime to other customers so they could generate revenue. That's how businesses work. It's not like you flip a switch and all of a sudden you can print more. It can't happen, and this is why it can't happen. And quite honestly, I think part of the reason why we're seeing so many bundles and so many, well, I mean, the EX boxes make sense because the margin's a little bit higher. But the booster boxes, if they all have to be packed by hand, that's a challenge. I'm sure the bundles are packed by hand as well. But the ETBs, they're clearly all packed by hand with all the little pieces in there. And that's gonna be a nightmare. When you add a manual component to manufacturing, it just slows everything down so very much. Outside of packing a small 6-pack box and you roll it down the line to shrink wrap and throw in a case. So, it all makes sense with what they're doing. This press release makes sense as well on their end, because quite honestly, there's nothing they can do other than to try to get people to put down the pitchforks and the torches. So anyway, guys, I hope this was a fascinating video. I enjoyed doing the research. Like, subscribe, join the Discord, and we'll talk soon, guys.